Welcome, History Adventure, to an extraordinary journey into one of the most fascinating and formidable civilizations of the ancient world, the Assyrian Empire. In this documentary, Assyrian Empire, Lions and Libraries, we will travel back thousands of years to the heart of Mesopotamia, where mighty kings ruled vast territories, monumental cities rose from the fertile plains, and an empire carved its legacy in stone, clay, and legend. From the roaring hunt scenes of lion-chasing warriors to the hushed halls of the great royal library at Nineveh, the Assyrians balanced power and intellect in ways that continue to inspire awe today. We will uncover the lives of great rulers like Ashurbanipal, witness the might of their armies, explore the grandeur of their palaces, and step inside the most ambitious collection of knowledge the ancient world had ever seen. Each chapter will take you deep into this world of conquest, culture, and innovation, revealing how the Assyrians not only commanded empires, but also preserved the wisdom of millennia. So sit back and prepare for a breathtaking adventure through power, pride, war, and wisdom. The lions are on the prowl, and the libraries are waiting to open their secrets to you. In the fertile lands between the Tigris and Euphrates, the Assyrian people emerged as a small, determined community in the city of Ashur. Over centuries, they transformed from humble traders into powerful conquerors. This chapter explores the origins of Assyria, from its early city-state days to its rise as a regional power. The narrative follows the transformation of Ashur into a religious and political center, where the city's patron god, Ashur, symbolized divine favor and imperial destiny. Leaders began building fortified walls, temples, and early military forces. Their strategic location along trade routes allowed wealth to flow in, fueling ambitions for expansion. We witness the seeds of the Assyrian warrior culture: discipline, organization, and a belief that conquest was sanctioned by the gods. These beginnings laid the foundation for one of the most formidable empires in history. As Assyria's influence grew, its kings embraced a new identity, that of warrior rulers, destined to expand their realm through military might. This chapter highlights the reign of early expansionist kings, such as Shamshi-Adad I, who forged alliances and launched campaigns against neighboring states. Assyrian armies, equipped with bronze-tipped spears, composite bows, and chariots, became a feared presence across Mesopotamia. The culture of war was infused into daily life. Victory steels celebrated conquests, and royal inscriptions boasted of the king's divine meant to rule. Palaces began displaying reliefs of kings in chariots, trampling foes, and offering captured cities to their god. These victories brought not only tribute and land, but also prestige, reinforcing the bond between king and deity. The image of the Assyrian monarch as both protector and conqueror became firmly established. Nineveh, destined to become the crown jewel of the Assyrian Empire, began as a modest settlement on the east bank of the Tigris. Under the reign of later kings, it blossomed into a thriving urban hub, boasting wide boulevards, lush gardens, and monumental gates. This chapter portrays Nineveh's early growth, highlighting its role as both a commercial center and a cultural beacon. Traders brought goods from across the ancient world: lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, cedar from Lebanon, and fine textiles from Babylon. Skilled artisans crafted ivory inlays, intricate jewelry, and monumental statues. Nineveh city planners laid out fortified walls stretching for miles, anticipating its future role as the imperial capital. Even in these early days, the city bore the marks of Assyrian ambition, blending beauty with impregnable defense. By the 4th century BCE, the Assyrian Empire had entered a new era of expansion under King Ashurbanipal II. This ambitious ruler not only conquered vast territories, but also reshaped the empire's cultural identity. He moved the capital to Kalhu, Nimrud, and transformed it into a city of unmatched grandeur. Palaces with towering stone reliefs depicted the king's exploits, hunting lions, leading armies, and receiving tribute. Ashurnasirpal's military campaigns were ruthless. Entire cities were deported or destroyed if they resisted. Yet, his reign also marked a flowering of art and architecture, with monumental gateways guarded by colossal Lamassu statues. These winged, human-headed bulls symbolized strength and divine protection. The king's building projects and military victories cemented his reputation as the architect of Assyria's imperial dominance. Among the most iconic symbols of Assyrian kingship was the royal lion hunt, a spectacle blending ceremony, sport, and propaganda. This chapter immerses us in the hunting grounds near the palace, where caged lions were released into an enclosed arena. The king, armed with bow and spear, would slay the beasts in front of courtiers and scribes. Reliefs from Ashurbanipal's palace depict these hunts in vivid detail, snarling lions charging, arrows piercing their hides, and the king delivering the final blow with a spear. The lion, seen as a symbol of chaos, was subdued by the king, the guardian of order. These hunts were meticulously staged, reinforcing the monarch's divine mandate to protect his people and dominate nature itself. When Tiglath-Pileser III ascended to the Assyrian throne in Tebeit-Sistur BCE, the empire faced instability. Provinces were restless, vassal kings were disobedient, and military systems had grown complacent. Determined to restore Assyria's dominance, Tiglath-Pileser initiated sweeping reforms that would forever change ancient warfare. He reorganized the army into a professional, year-round force, no longer relying solely on seasonal levies. Infantry, cavalry, and chariot divisions were given specialized training, and the empire's first dedicated corps of engineers emerged, capable of building siege ramps, mobile towers, and pontoon bridges. Iron weaponry replaced bronze on a large scale, giving Assyrian soldiers superior cutting and piercing power. Tiglath-Pileser also revolutionized governance. Newly conquered territories were transformed into Assyrian provinces under appointed governors, rather than left to semi-independent vassals. This ensured tighter control, faster tax collection, and immediate military mobilization if needed. Diplomacy and terror walked hand in hand in his reign. Cities that submitted willingly were rewarded with autonomy and favorable trade terms, while those that resisted were met with devastating sieges, mass deportations, and public executions. His calculated cruelty sent a clear message across the Near East: defy Assyria at your peril. By the end of his reign, Tiglath-Pileser III had forged a tightly centralized empire with a permanent, elite army, a machine that would drive Assyrian dominance for the next century. His reign marked the birth of the Assyrian Empire as a superpower, feared and respected from Egypt to the Iranian plateau. In Tebeit-Sistur BCE, the fortified city of Arpad in northern Syria defied Assyrian authority. Tiglath-Pileser III could not allow such defiance to inspire other vassals, so he marched with a massive army determined to make an example. Arpad's walls were thick and high, its defenders well provisioned. The siege dragged on for 3 years, a testament to the city's stubborn resistance. The Assyrians employed every tactic in their arsenal: battering rams pounding gates, siege towers looming over parapets, sappers tunneling beneath walls to weaken foundations. Archers rained down arrows, while slingers kept defenders pinned. The turning point came when Assyrian engineers diverted a nearby stream, cutting off Arpad's water supply. With thirst and disease spreading, the defenders' resolve broke. The city finally fell in Chebite Sisas BCE. What followed was a grim display of Assyrian retribution. Leaders were executed, thousands deported, and the city was repopulated with loyal Assyrian subjects. The siege of Arpad sent shockwaves through the region. Neighboring kingdoms quickly sent tribute, rather than risk a similar fate. The lesson was clear. Assyrian patience was as deadly as its weapons, and no wall was high enough to keep them out forever. One of the hallmarks and most feared aspects of Assyrian rule was the mass deportation of conquered peoples. Tiglath-Pileser III perfected this policy, using it not only as punishment, but as a calculated tool of imperial control. When a city or kingdom was subdued, large portions of its population were forcibly relocated to distant parts of the empire. Skilled artisans might be sent to work in Nineveh's palaces, farmers to till new lands, and soldiers absorbed into the Assyrian army. This broke local power structures, prevented uprisings, and spread Assyrian influence through cultural assimilation. While brutal in execution, deportations often came with surprising organization. Records show that deportees were sometimes given provisions for the journey and settled in productive regions, revitalizing underdeveloped areas of the empire. However, the emotional toll was immense. Families torn apart, cultural identities erased, and ancestral lands abandoned. This chapter follows the journey of a group of deportees from Arpad to the city of Kalhu. We see their weary march under military escort, their wonder and fear upon arriving in a bustling Assyrian capital, and their gradual integration into a new life. Through this policy, the Assyrians maintained one of the most stable multi-ethnic empires of the ancient world. But at a terrible human cost. In Tebite Ashur BCE, a man named Sargon seized the Assyrian throne under circumstances still debated by historians. Whether through palace intrigue or succession crisis, Sargon II quickly proved himself one of Assyria's most brilliant strategists. One of his first acts was the conquest of Samaria, capital of the Kingdom of Israel, after a 3-year siege. The city's fall marked the end of the northern Israelite kingdom, and its people were deported across the empire. Sargon's military campaigns extended into Anatolia, defeating the kingdom of Urartu, and deep into the Levant, where he faced rebellious city-states supported by Egypt. Sargon was not only a warrior, but also a visionary builder. He constructed a new capital at Dur-Sharukin, fortress of Sargon, a meticulously planned city with immense walls, grand palaces, and elaborate reliefs celebrating his victories. Yet, his reign ended mysteriously during a campaign in Anatolia, where he was reportedly killed in battle. His body never recovered. This was considered an ill omen, casting a shadow over his dynasty. But his military genius and grand architectural legacy ensured his place among the greatest Assyrian kings. Dur-Sharukin, the dream city of Sargon II, was unlike any other in the ancient world. Built from scratch on a vast plain, it was designed as both an impregnable fortress and a showpiece of Assyrian power. Its walls stretched for miles, punctuated by colossal gates guarded by Lamassu statues, winged bulls with human faces, carved from single blocks of stone. Inside, palaces rose with dazzling reliefs depicting Sargon's conquests and divine favor. The central palace boasted massive courtyards, throne rooms with cedar ceilings, and a banquet hall large enough to host hundreds of foreign envoys. The city was also an administrative hub, with quarters for scribes, storerooms filled with tribute goods, and temples dedicated to the gods Ashur, Nabu, and Ishtar. Yet tragedy struck when Sargon II died before fully inhabiting his masterpiece. His successor, Sennacherib, abandoned Dur-Sharrukin in favor of Nineveh. Over time, the fortress city was left to the sands, a monument to ambition and impermanence. Today, Dur-Sharrukin's ruins still bear silent witness to a king's vision. A place where stone, art, and politics fused into a declaration of imperial grandeur. When Sennacherib took the throne in Qibait-Lingwu BCE, he inherited a vast empire and a monumental task. His father's fortress city, Dur-Sharrukin, was unfinished and already politically tainted by the ill omen of Sargon II's mysterious death. Sennacherib decided to abandon it entirely and focus on Nineveh, transforming it into the most magnificent capital the world had ever seen. He ordered the expansion of Nineveh's walls to a staggering length of over 7 miles, enclosing lush gardens, aqueduct-fed parks, and sprawling palace complexes. The Palace Without Rival, as he named it, featured vast halls adorned with reliefs of military campaigns and elaborate lion hunts. Sennacherib also oversaw the construction of massive aqueducts, engineering marvels that brought water from distant mountains into the city. But his reign was also defined by relentless warfare. Most famously, Sennacherib led a campaign against the Kingdom of Judah, besieging its fortified cities. His records boast of trapping King Hezekiah of Jerusalem like a bird in a cage, though the city itself was never taken. His ruthlessness was legendary. Cities that resisted faced utter destruction, their inhabitants deported or slaughtered. Despite his brilliance as a builder, Sennacherib's reign ended violently. He was assassinated by his own sons in a palace coup, a grim testament to the dangers of absolute power. Yet his vision of Nineveh as a city of unmatched beauty and strength endured, becoming a jewel of the ancient world. The Palace Without Rival was more than a royal residence. It was a political statement carved in stone. Built by Sennacherib at Nineveh, this immense complex was designed to awe visitors and intimidate foreign envoys. Its entrance was flanked by colossal Lamassu statues, each weighing several tons, guarding the path to the king's throne room. Walls were lined with intricately carved alabaster reliefs, depicting Sennacherib's victories, sieges, and ceremonial lion hunts. Ceilings were made from imported cedarwood, and the floors were polished to a mirror-like sheen. The palace was also an administrative heart of the empire, housing scribes, record keepers, seers, and storage rooms filled with tribute from across the Near East. Delegations from Babylon, Egypt, and beyond would walk through its halls, their footsteps echoing against walls that proclaimed Assyria's might in stone and image. The gardens surrounding the palace were said to rival the hanging gardens of Babylon, with terraces, fountains, and exotic plants brought from distant lands. Water flowed through a system of canals and aqueducts, a constant reminder of the king's control over nature itself. In the Palace Without Rival, power was not only wielded, it was displayed in every detail, from the roar of carved lions to the serene smile of the king in relief. In Qibait-Lingwu BCE, Sennacherib turned his military might toward the kingdom of Judah, whose king, Hezekiah, had rebelled against Assyrian rule. The fortified city of Lachish became the primary target, guarding the road to Jerusalem. Sennacherib's army surrounded Lachish with ruthless efficiency. Siege ramps were built from tons of earth and stone, inching ever closer to the city walls. Massive battering rams, sheathed in metal, smashed at the gates while archers and slingers rained projectiles on defenders. Inside the city, the people fought desperately, but the Assyrian war machine was relentless. Reliefs from Sennacherib's palace depict the grim aftermath. defenders impaled, captives led away, and spoils of war presented to the king. The fall of Lachish served as both punishment and warning to other rebellious states. Jerusalem, seeing the fate of Lachish, sent tribute to Sennacherib, avoiding destruction. The king's account of the siege became one of the most detailed war records in antiquity, immortalized in the very walls of Nineveh. Supplying Nineveh with water was a feat of engineering brilliance. Sennacherib's aqueducts, stretching over miles, were the largest and most sophisticated of their time. The Jerwan Aqueduct, constructed from massive stone blocks, carried water from distant springs across valleys and hills to feed Nineveh's gardens and fountains. Channels carved into the stone were sealed with waterproof bitumen, ensuring minimal loss. The aqueduct system was not just functional, but symbolic, a demonstration of Assyria's ability to bend nature to its will. Inscriptions along the structure praised Sennacherib as the bringer of life to the city, equating his engineering achievements with divine favor. This infrastructure allowed Nineveh to sustain a large population, support expansive gardens, and maintain luxurious amenities even during dry seasons. It also ensured the city could endure prolonged sieges without fear of thirst. Today, remnants of these aqueducts stand as a testament to the Assyrian mastery of engineering, projects that would not be rivaled for centuries. Sennacherib's relationship with Babylon was turbulent. Initially, he tried to maintain control through appointed governors, but frequent rebellions tested his patience. In Lubaid-Basarjop BCE, after yet another uprising, this time supported by Elam, Sennacherib decided on a brutal solution. He marched his army south and besieged Babylon. The city, sacred to many in Mesopotamia, resisted fiercely, but Assyrian siegecraft eventually prevailed. In an act that shocked the ancient world, Sennacherib ordered the complete destruction of Babylon. Temples were torn down, idols taken, and the city's walls leveled. The Euphrates was diverted to flood the ruins, erasing centuries of history. This act earned Sennacherib infamy, painting him as both a ruthless conqueror and a desecrator of holy sites. While the destruction secured Assyrian dominance, in the short term, it sowed seeds of deep resentment that would trouble his successors. After the assassination of Sennacherib in Lubaid-Basar BCE, his son Esarhaddon ascended the throne in a tense atmosphere. Unlike his father's aggressive policies toward Babylon, Esarhaddon sought reconciliation. Understanding the city's deep religious and cultural significance, he initiated one of the most ambitious reconstruction projects in ancient history, the complete rebuilding of Babylon. Esarhaddon declared that the destruction of Babylon was a grave offense to the gods. He ordered the return of looted idols, the restoration of temples, and the rebuilding of city walls. Skilled artisans, architects, and laborers from across the empire were brought in to restore the city to its former glory. His reign was also marked by a balance of military strength and diplomatic finesse. He launched campaigns into Egypt, becoming one of the few Mesopotamian kings to conquer Memphis. Yet he also maintained alliances with neighboring states through strategic marriages and generous tribute arrangements. Esarhaddon's reign brought a rare period of stability and prosperity to the Assyrian Empire. By restoring, he not only repaired political fractures but also strengthened his legitimacy as a ruler blessed by the gods, a man who could destroy, but more importantly rebuild. In Lubaid-Basar BCE, Esarhaddon turned his eyes westward toward Egypt, a land long seen as both a rival and a prize. Egypt's pharaoh Taharka had been meddling in Levantine affairs, supporting rebellions against Assyria. Esarhaddon resolved to end this interference once and for all. The campaign was grueling. The Assyrian army marched through the Sinai Desert, facing heat, thirst, and hostile tribes. Upon reaching the Nile Delta, they encountered fortified cities, defended by seasoned Egyptian warriors and Nubian allies. Esarhaddon's forces employed their usual precision, siege towers, archers, and relentless infantry assaults. Memphis fell after a fierce battle, and Taharqa fled south to Thebes. Assyria installed loyal governors and extracted vast tribute, including gold, linen, and exotic animals. This victory marked one of the greatest achievements of Esarhaddon's reign, expanding Assyrian influence into Africa. However, holding Egypt proved difficult, as the territory would rebel repeatedly in the years to come. Late in his reign, Esarhaddon faced a problem that haunted many kings: the question of succession. His decision to divide power between his sons was unprecedented and risky. Ashurbanipal was named king of Assyria, while his brother Shamash-shum-ukin was given the throne of Babylon. To ensure a smooth transition, Esarhaddon made the princes swear oaths of loyalty, witnessed by nobles and foreign envoys. However, this delicate arrangement was fraught with tension. Babylon and Assyria had historically been rivals, and giving power to two brothers in separate capitals was a gamble. Ashurbanipal, ascending the throne in Lubite Losajul BCE, was unlike any previous Assyrian king. He was a warrior of exceptional skill, yet also a scholar fluent in multiple languages, including Akkadian and Sumerian. His reign combined military expansion with an unprecedented commitment to preserving knowledge. Militarily, he crushed rebellions in Egypt, defeated Elam, and quelled uprisings across the empire. His campaigns were brutal, marked by the destruction of enemy capitals and the public display of captured rulers. Culturally, Ashurbanipal's greatest legacy was the creation of the Library of Nineveh, a vast collection of clay tablets containing texts on history, religion, science, and literature, including the Epic of Gilgamesh. He dispatched scribes to copy works from across Mesopotamia, ensuring that the wisdom of the ages would be preserved. Ashurbanipal's reign represented the pinnacle of Assyrian power, a fusion of military might and intellectual ambition unmatched. In the ancient Near East, Ashurbanipal continued the royal tradition of lion hunts, but elevated them into a display of both skill and ceremony. These hunts, held within controlled arenas, symbolized the king's role as the protector of order against chaos, the lion being the ultimate embodiment of untamed power. The hunts began with the release of lions from cages, their roars echoing across the arena. Ashurbanipal, armed with a powerful bow, would strike the first blow. Spears, swords, and chariots followed, as attendants ensured the beasts could not escape. Reliefs from his palace capture the drama: lions leaping at the king's chariot, arrows mid-flight, and the final moments when the king places his hand upon a slain lion as a gesture of dominance and respect. These hunts were as much propaganda as they were sport, reinforcing the image of Ashurbanipal as a warrior, ruler, and guardian of his people. By the mid-5th century BCE, tensions between Ashurbanipal and his brother Shamash-shum-ukin, king of Babylon, had reached a breaking point. Initially bound by their father Esarhaddon's succession plan, the brothers ruled separate realms, Assyria and Babylon. But suspicion, rivalry, and the weight of ancient animosities between their peoples made peace fragile. Shamash-shum-ukin sought to cast off Assyrian dominance, forming a coalition of rebels that included Elam, Chaldea, and various Aramean tribes. For several years, he prepared in secret, amassing troops and fortifying cities. When open war erupted around Library of Ashurbanipal BCE, the conflict consumed the region. Ashurbanipal responded with overwhelming force. His armies laid siege to Babylon, cutting off supplies and blocking river access. The siege dragged on for 2 years, causing famine and disease within the city walls. Chronicles describe desperate scenes of starvation, cannibalism, and mass death. When Babylon finally fell in Lubayt Sisabat BCE, it was a ruin. Shamash Shum-Ukin perished. Sources differ on whether he died in battle, by suicide, or was executed. Ashurbanipal had won, but at a terrible cost, both in lives and in the relationship between Assyria and its southern territories. The ancient kingdom of Elam, long a rival to Assyria, supported Shamash Shum-Ukin's rebellion and paid a heavy price. In Lubayt Sisabat BCE, Ashurbanipal launched a series of devastating campaigns into Elamite territory. Assyrian forces stormed the Elamite capital of Susa, looting its temples and palaces. Inscriptions boast of taking the statues of Elam's gods and scattering the bones of their kings, an intentional act of humiliation. Reliefs from Nineveh depict the brutal aftermath: burning cities, prisoners led away with ropes through their noses, and the systematic dismantling of Elam's fortifications. Ashurbanipal declared that Elam's name and people would be erased from history. While this was hyperbole, Elamite culture persisted for centuries. The destruction of Susa marked the end of Elam as a major power in the ancient Near East. This campaign, though militarily successful, also revealed the increasingly destructive nature of Assyrian warfare. Prioritizing annihilation over conquest, Ashurbanipal's greatest cultural legacy was his vast library at Nineveh. Located within the palace complex, it housed over Sanzar Ling clay tablets covering every field of knowledge known to Mesopotamia: history, religion, law, medicine, mathematics, astronomy, and literature. Scribes traveled across the empire to copy or collect works from other libraries. Many tablets were duplicates, ensuring the preservation of important texts. Among the treasures were the Epic of Gilgamesh, medical treatises, and omens interpreted from celestial movements. The library was meticulous, with each tablet marked by a colophon bearing the king's name and a curse against those who might damage or steal it. Ashurbanipal himself took pride in reading and understanding these works, a rarity among ancient monarchs. This repository of knowledge ensured that when Nineveh eventually fell, much of Mesopotamian literature survived, rediscovered by archaeologists thousands of years later, offering a priceless window into the ancient world. The gardens of Nineveh, often compared to the fabled Hanging Gardens of Babylon, were a marvel of engineering and aesthetics. Built under Sennacherib and expanded by Ashurbanipal, these terraced landscapes featured exotic plants from across the empire: date palms from Arabia, cedars from Lebanon, pomegranates from the Levant, and fragrant flowers from Anatolia. Water flowed through an elaborate canal and aqueduct system, feeding fountains, pools, and irrigation channels. The gardens were not merely decorative, but symbolic, representing the king's dominion over nature. They also served diplomatic purposes, impressing foreign envoys and dignitaries with Assyria's wealth and sophistication. Walking through the gardens, one might pass under pergolas heavy with vines, hear the calls of exotic birds, and see reliefs depicting the king's victories among the greenery. These gardens were as much propaganda as pleasure, a living testament to the empire's reach and resources. Despite Ashurbanipal's military victories and cultural achievements, cracks were forming in the foundations of the empire. The relentless warfare had drained resources, while the vastness of Assyrian territory made it increasingly difficult to govern. After Ashurbanipal's death around Lubite century BCE, records grow sparse, a sign of political instability. Vassal states began testing Assyria's strength. Rebellions flared in distant provinces, and internal power struggles weakened the central authority. The empire's harsh treatment of conquered peoples meant that many awaited an opportunity for revenge. Economic pressures also mounted. Maintaining large standing armies, lavish building projects, and extensive administrative systems required constant tribute, but as rebellions increased, the flow of resources slowed. The Assyrian war machine, once unstoppable, was beginning to falter. This chapter marks the turning point, the moment when the world's most powerful empire began its slow slide toward collapse. By the late 5th century BCE, the enemies of Assyria were no longer scattered plaguers, fearful states. They were organized, determined powers. The Medes in the Iranian plateau, led by King Cyaxares, and the Babylonians under Nabopolassar began forging a powerful alliance. This coalition was united by a common goal: the destruction of Assyrian dominance. The Medes brought fierce cavalry and expert archers, while the Babylonians contributed siege expertise and strategic knowledge of Mesopotamia's river systems. Assyrian garrisons along the eastern front began to fall one by one. The old imperial tactic of terrifying enemies into submission was losing effectiveness. These foes would not be intimidated. Their armies probed Assyria's borders, striking at supply lines and encouraging revolts in subject cities. In Nineveh, the royal court recognized the danger but underestimated the scale of the threat. Instead of decisive action, resources were diverted to suppress smaller uprisings. Giving the coalition time to grow stronger, the stage was being set for the greatest war Assyria had ever faced. One it would not survive. As the coalition advanced, isolated Assyrian garrisons became vulnerable. Cities that had once been secure under Assyrian protection now faced well-coordinated attacks. Median horse archers would encircle a garrison, cutting off any escape. Babylonian siege units would then bring battering rams and siege towers to bear. With supply lines severed, many Assyrian outposts fell within weeks. Survivors were often executed or absorbed into the enemy armies, swelling their ranks. The loss of these outposts not only reduced Assyria's military reach, but also shattered its aura of invincibility. Regions that had paid tribute for generations began openly rebelling, further stretching the already thin Assyrian forces. For the first time in centuries, the empire was on the defensive, reacting rather than dictating the pace of war. Every lost garrison brought the coalition closer to the heart of Assyria. In Lubite Ishara BCE, the Medes and Babylonians brought their combined armies to the gates of Nineveh. The city's massive walls and formidable defenses had withstood attacks for centuries, but the coalition was determined to end Assyrian rule once and for all. The siege lasted for months. Babylonian engineers targeted the city's gates and towers with relentless battering, while Median forces cut off all approaches. According to later accounts, heavy rains caused the Tigris River to flood, undermining part of Nineveh's walls, a disaster the attackers exploited. Assyrian defenders fought ferociously, launching counterattacks from the gates and raining arrows from the ramparts. But the enemy was too numerous, too coordinated. Once the walls were breached, street-to-street fighting erupted. The royal palace became the final stronghold, but it too was overwhelmed. The sack of Nineveh was catastrophic. Temples were looted, palaces burned, and countless civilians killed or enslaved. The city that had been the jewel of the ancient world lay in ruins. signaling the end of the Assyrian Empire. As Nineveh's defenses collapsed, members of the Assyrian royal family attempted to flee. Chronicles describe chaotic scenes as nobles, soldiers, and servants scrambled to escape the burning city. Some sought refuge in the western provinces, hoping to rally loyal forces. Others tried to reach Haran, one of the last Assyrian strongholds. Caravans of refugees, mixing royalty, scribes carrying precious archives, and soldiers escorting them, wound their way through the countryside, pursued by enemy raiding parties. Not all escaped. Many were captured along the way, paraded as trophies before enemy kings. The Assyrian royal identity, once a symbol of divine power, was now a target for humiliation. These desperate flights marked the final unraveling of centralized Assyrian authority. Even if a few strongholds remained, the empire's political and spiritual heart was gone. After the fall of Nineveh, the surviving Assyrian leadership regrouped at Haran, a strategically placed city in the western reaches of the former empire. Here, they proclaimed a new king, Ashur-uballit II, and vowed to reclaim their lands. Haran's walls were strong, and the city was provisioned for a long defense. The Assyrians sent urgent appeals to Egypt, whose pharaoh saw value in keeping Assyria as a buffer state. Egyptian troops marched to join them, and for a brief moment, it seemed possible that the empire might endure in some form. But in Library BCE, the coalition of Medes and Babylonians came for Haran. The siege was fierce, but without the resources of the old capital, the defenders could not hold out. The city fell, and with it the last organized resistance of the Assyrian Empire. Ashur-uballit II vanished from history, likely killed or exiled. The once great empire, which had dominated the Near East for centuries, was gone, remembered in equal measure for its brutality and its brilliance. When Haran fell in Library BCE, the Assyrian Empire ceased to exist as a political power. Its former territories were divided between the victors, the Babylonians taking Mesopotamia, and the Medes controlling the Iranian plateau and parts of Anatolia. The people of Assyria did not vanish overnight. Many became subjects of the new rulers, living in their old cities under foreign governors. Assyrian soldiers and administrators adapted to life under the Babylonians or sought service in other armies. The destruction of Nineveh and other major cities left scars that lasted for generations. Grand palaces lay in ruins, overgrown and forgotten. Roads that once bustled with caravans fell silent. Temples once filled with offerings now stood empty, their gods abandoned or replaced. Yet the memory of Assyrian power endured, sometimes in awe, often in fear. In the years that followed, Assyria became a cautionary tale for rulers, a reminder that even the mightiest empire could fall, and that cruelty, while effective in the short term, could breed enemies that outlast any king. Although the empire had fallen, Assyrian culture did not disappear. Many traditions, artistic styles, and administrative systems were absorbed by the Babylonians and later by the Persians. Relief carving techniques pioneered in Assyrian palaces continued to influence Mesopotamian art for centuries. The use of Aramaic as an administrative language, a practice widespread in late Assyrian rule, persisted across empires, eventually becoming the lingua franca of the Near East. Assyrian religious traditions were partially maintained. The god Ashur was still revered in some areas, though often under new names or merged with other deities. Former Assyrian scribes found work in Babylonian temples, preserving texts and teaching younger generations. This cultural continuity ensured that even as a political entity, Assyria was gone, its imprint on civilization remained deeply embedded in in the foundations of Near Eastern governance, architecture, and scholarship. Long after its fall, Assyria lived on in legend. Babylonian and Hebrew texts remembered it as a brutal, prideful empire, brought down by divine judgment. Prophets spoke of Nineveh's destruction as punishment for arrogance and cruelty. Greek historians wove tales of the Assyrian queen Semiramis, a semi-mythical figure said to have built mighty cities and waged wars across Asia. These legends often exaggerated events, turning kings and queens into characters of myth and moral lessons. In the popular imagination of surrounding peoples, the Assyrians were both feared conquerors and symbols of the transience of power. These stories preserved the memory of an empire that had once dominated the known world, shaping how history would remember them, not just for their achievements in architecture, warfare, and administration, but also for the severity of their rule. For centuries, the location of Nineveh and other Assyrian cities was lost to memory. By the 14th century, European explorers and archaeologists began seeking the ruins described in ancient texts. In Ichenbabite Siserti, Austin Henry Layard excavated at the site of Kuyunjik, uncovering colossal Lamassu statues, palace reliefs, and thousands of clay tablets from Ashurbanipal's library. These finds astonished the world, revealing the sophistication of Assyrian art and scholarship. The reliefs depicting lion hunts, sieges, and royal ceremonies provided vivid images of a world thought to be purely legendary. The library's tablets allowed scholars to read the Epic of Gilgamesh for the first time in millennia, transforming our understanding of ancient literature. These discoveries sparked a wave of Mesopotamian archaeology, leading to further excavations in Kalhu, Nimrud, Dur Sharukin, and other sites. Assyria emerged from the dust, not as a forgotten tyrant, but as a foundational chapter in human civilization. Following the great excavations, Assyrian treasures found their way into the world's museums. The British Museum in London became home to many of Layard's finds. Fort, including the lion hunt reliefs and massive Lamassu statues. The Louvre in Paris and museums in Berlin, Istanbul, and New York also displayed Assyrian artifacts. These exhibitions brought the ancient empire into public view, inspiring awe and fascination. Visitors could walk among the stone panels that once lined the walls of Nineveh's palaces, or stand beneath the towering gaze of a Lamassu. However, the removal of these artifacts from their homeland sparked debates about cultural heritage and ownership, debates that continue. The Assyrians revolutionized warfare in ways that influenced armies for centuries. They developed the first truly professional standing army, specialized units for siegecraft, and advanced military logistics. Their chariot and cavalry tactics, combined with the disciplined use of iron weapons, made them formidable opponents. Effect psychological warfare, public displays of conquered kings, the deportation of rebellious populations, and inscriptions boasting of brutal punishments served as early forms of state propaganda. While this instilled fear, it also secured their borders for generations. Elements of Assyrian strategy, including supply line management, the integration of engineering corps, and the use of combined arms, were adopted by later empires such as the Persians, Greeks, and Romans. Though remembered for their cruelty, the Assyrians' military innovations represent a turning point in human history. The transformation of war from seasonal raiding to year-round, state-organized campaigns that could decide the fate of nations. Beyond war, the Assyrians were master builders and artists. Architectural marvels, decorated with alabaster reliefs that captured both the grandeur of the king and the everyday life of the empire. The Lamassu statues, winged bulls with human heads, became iconic symbols of Assyrian authority, blending myth with political messaging. Intricate wall carvings depicted everything from royal hunts to detailed maps of conquered lands. Urban planning was also advanced. Cities like Nineveh and Kalhu featured organized streets, monumental gates, and water systems that supplied gardens, baths, and fountains. These engineering feats reflected not just utility, but also a deliberate display of power. 3. Even after the empire's fall, Assyrian artistic influence persisted. Relief carving techniques and monumental sculpture styles were adapted by later empires across the Near East. Today, Assyrian art continues to inspire awe for its scale, detail, and storytelling power. Today, Assyrians live across the globe, from Iraq, Syria, and Iran to diasporas in the United States, Europe, and Australia. They maintain a distinct cultural identity rooted in ancient Mesopotamian traditions, language, and faith. Modern Assyrians speak Neo-Aramaic dialects, direct descendants of the language used in the late empire. Their festivals, music, and cuisine carry echoes of ancient customs, while churches and community centers preserve both religious and cultural heritage. For many, the ruins of Nineveh, Kalhu, and Dur-Sharukin are not just archaeological sites, they are ancestral cities. The Assyrian flag with its star of Ashur symbolizes continuity from ancient kings to modern communities. Despite historical hardships, including persecution and displacement, the Assyrian people remain resilient. Their identity serves as a living bridge between the ancient empire and the modern world, proving that while nations may fall, cultures can endure for millennia. The Assyrian Empire's story is both a triumph and a warning. Its military discipline, administrative efficiency, and cultural achievements demonstrate the heights of human organization. Yet its reliance on fear, overextension, and constant warfare reveal the dangers of unsustainable imperial policies. Historians draw parallels between Assyria and later empires that rose and fell under similar pressures. The balance between strength and diplomacy, expansion and consolidation, remains a timeless challenge for leaders. The preservation of Assyrian knowledge, especially through the Library of Nineveh, reminds us that cultural investment can outlast political power. The fact that we can still read the Epic of Gilgamesh is a direct result of decisions made by Assyrian kings thousands of years ago. The Assyrian Empire teaches us that while armies may win battles, it is ideas, art, and learning that endure in the human story. The title, Lions and Libraries, encapsulates the two sides of the Assyrian legacy. The lion, a symbol of ferocity, dominance, and the raw power of kings, represents Assyria's military strength, and the ruthless means by which it built an empire. The library, a repository of wisdom and culture, represents its intellectual achievements and contributions to human civilization. From the roaring arenas of royal lion hunts to the quiet halls of Ashurbanipal's library, the Assyrians demonstrated that a civilization could embody both destruction and creation. One without the other would not have defined the empire. It was the combination of fear and knowledge, power and preservation, that made Assyria unique. Today, the lions live on in stone reliefs, frozen mid-leap, while the library's clay tablets still speak across millennia. Together, they remind us that history is not simply about conquest or culture, but about the enduring interplay between the two. And so, our journey through the Assyrian Empire comes to an end. From the roar of lions in royal arenas to the quiet scratch of styluses in the grand library of Nineveh, We have witnessed the rise of warrior kings, the relentless march of armies, the splendor of palaces and gardens, and the preservation of ancient wisdom on clay tablets that outlived the empire itself. Assyria's story is not simply one of conquest or collapse. It is a lesson in the dual nature of power. It shows us how ambition can build wonders and forge legacies, yet also sow the seeds of its own downfall. The same kings who commanded armies also commanded scholars. The same hands that drew bows also turned the pages of history. Today, though their cities lie in ruins, the Assyrians still speak to us. In their art, their writings, and their enduring influence on civilization, the lions remind us of their strength. The libraries remind us of their wisdom. Thank you for walking this path through time with me. May the echoes of Assyria inspire us to value not only the power we wield, but the knowledge we preserve.